Welcome to Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music with your host, multi-award-winning music producer, Eddie Kilroy. And now, here's your host, Eddie Kilroy.
Hi, welcome to another edition of Kilroy's Outlaws, Legends, and Behind the Music. How are you today? We're doing great here. Ooh, Lord. Liz, how are you?
Well, hi. How are you?
We're having fun today. And we're just getting started, for goodness sake, with another podcast, Kilroy's Outlaws, Legends, and Behind the Music. I've already said it, but I want to say it again because I want to ask you also, if you enjoy what we're doing, please subscribe. And I want to thank our sponsor, Total Feeds. Are they an incredible company? Yes, they are. They make feeds for all species, including humans.
When are you going to start taking
Total
it?
People.
You need to take it.
Well, I didn't qualify being a people. No. What are we going to talk about today? Jerry Lee Lewis?
I think Jerry Lee Lewis would be a wonderful topic
Yeah,
today.
you know, we've had a lot of calls saying more or less, Kilroy, tell me a Jerry Lee Lewis story. Mm-hmm. I can't tell a Jerry Lee Lewis story because I've got too many Jerry Lee Lewis stories. Yeah. But I'll tell you all I can. Gosh.
Why don't we start at the beginning?
At the beginning.
Yeah.
That's
the best place to start.
So long ago. Yeah, you never start from the back of a book.
No.
Which reminds me of something else. Why do people say, hey, I read up on this? Who reads up? It's I read down on this.
You're the only one who says that.
Well, I'm thinking I hear everybody say that. I read up on it.
You can just read down all you want. The rest of us will read up. So
now we're talking about Jerry Lee Lewis.
Moving right along with Jerry.
I met Jerry Lee Lewis, gosh, way over 50 years ago. I was just a kid. Yeah.
You met whom first? I know you know
Mickey.
all three of them.
Yeah, Mickey and I were friends, and Mickey introduced me to Jerry Lee Lewis.
Okay.
And which, of course, everybody knows is Mickey's first cousin. And we struck up a pretty good friendship, and we had a lot of good times together, just kind of hanging out. We shot pool a lot. Mickey and Jerry Lee and I would go to the pool hall, and we'd play pool and maybe drink 2-3 beers. Or maybe just a beer.
2 or 3?
2 or 3, starting off, right? Jerry
just to warm up.
Jerry and Mickey both were good pool players. Both of them could shoot pool. Jerry was a little better than Mickey, but Mickey was better than I. But we had a good time playing it, and we kind of ran together and did some things other than music. That was before Jerry became a hit, and he said many times, he said, someday I'm going to put a record out. And that was what we said in the old days. We're not going to release a record or we're going to put a record. I'm going to put a record out.
Well, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. And eventually he went to Sun Records in Memphis and got with Sam Phillips. And everybody knows the rest. He recorded Crazy Arms. You know, that's interesting. Ray Price had the #1 record on the song Crazy Arms. And 6 weeks later, about 10 weeks later, Sam Phillips released Crazy Arms by Jerry Lee Lewis, and the only instruments on the record was a piano and a drum. And the record went #1 just about 10 weeks after Ray Price had #1 on the same song. Well, it's amazing.
Well, I guess a different style.
Yeah.
Definitely. Rocking versus Ray Price.
It was different. And, but it was amazing that the same song, both of them went #1 so close together. And then Jerry turned the world upside down some years later, not too many years, 3 or 4 years, with a whole lot of shaking going on. And it never quit, not for a long time. And Jerry Lee Lewis stories, I've got so many. We did a lot together, and of course I produced quite a few of his records. And luckily we had hits on them. But Jerry was a different kind of cat, as everybody knew. I think one of the funniest stories, and I'm going to be flip-flopping back and forth, but it's kind of in the same time frame, is Jerry was working at a club just for one night, maybe 2 nights, Jimmy Minuta's Club in Houston, Texas. So Mickey and I went and picked Jerry up at the hotel and went to this restaurant to eat. And Jerry smoking a big cigar, and there were some teenage girls sitting right behind us, backed up to him. And they're talking teenage girl stuff, just jabbering, chattering away, And Jerry was smarting off at him. He had a big cigar.
You mean like that one in the album right there?
Yeah, like that one in the album. And he had a cigar, and he would turn halfway to those girls, say, yeah, yakety yak, yakety yak. They just kept on talking and ignoring him, and he kept on and kept on. "Ah, you're doing girl talk, you're getting on my nerves. Now, just carry on all you want." He was picking on these girls. And I'm sitting right across the table, and I saw it coming, and I couldn't say anything. One of those girls just took a big glass of ice water, and just poured it over his head. And he looked like a drowned rat in the cigarette.
Good for her. Good for them.
And he said, "Well, I guess she told me."
I guess they did.
Yeah, and so I guess they didn't know who he was. Probably years later, when Jerry was a superstar, that same young teenager probably said, "One time I poured a glass of water on that guy's head."
All right. So when did you become involved in his life?
Musically
and financially and
well, yeah,
everything.
The financial thing with Jerry was always up and down. Not for me. I mean, Jerry always took care of me, but his finances were up and down because he was so loose with his money. What he had money, he was going to spend it. That's what it was for. But no, I put Jerry Lee Lewis country. He had been a rock and roll star, and had become very cold, and nothing was happening. And he signed with Mercury Records. And it just so happened I took a position with Mercury in marketing and promotion. And I called Jerry down in Faraday, Louisiana, and I said, "Hey, Jerry," I said, "No, let me back up. I'm wrong. I talked to Mercury in New York and said, the first thing I'm going to do is put Jerry Lee Lewis country." And they said, "Oh, he doesn't want to record for us, and we don't want to record him anymore. He's just a pain, and we don't like him. He doesn't like us." And I said, "I can get him in the studio, Charlie." I was talking to Charlie Fash. And so I called Jerry down in Faraday, and I said, "Hey, son, I'm with Mercury now." And he said, "Well, that's good, man. I'm glad you got a good job and everything's going well." I said, "Hey, I want to make a country record with you." And he said, "I've got a bunch of country records cut." And he started rattling off a bunch of Hank Williams songs. I said, no, a new song, country song, and son, I'll put you back on top of the charts. He said, "Well, let me think about it and talk to Cecil about it." And he called me back. Who
was Cecil?
Cecil was his road manager and kind of a manager, but more than that, a lifelong friend. They went to school together. Matter of fact, I'm going to say it. I say everything anyway. Cecil and Jerry did something in Faraday when they were teenagers against the law. And I don't think it was anything serious. It could have been like maybe breaking into a filling station. I don't know for sure.
Well, that's serious.
Well, not if it was a small station.
No,
it wasn't one of those big service stations.
Okay.
A little bitty
Only a little one
gas
is
station.
not serious.
Right.
All right.
Cecil took the fall for that, and I guess Jerry kind of owed him, plus they were good friends, so he took him on board, and he became kind of Jerry's road manager, and you can't say manager because nobody could manage Jerry Lee Lewis. But anyhow, they were good friends, so they talked it over, and Jerry called back and said, "Okay, because you're at Mercury, I will come in and record." And I said, "Great, man, great." So as anybody does when they're getting ready to record or produce someone, you call all the major publishers in town in Nashville and contact all the writers that you have a relationship with and tell them you're looking for songs for Jerry Lee Lewis, country. And I left town. I had to go on the road for about 10 days. And I got back into the office, and there was one song in the basket. Only one.
Nobody wanted them,
Nobody
right?
wanted the Jerry Lee Lewis record. And I said, "Oh, my God."
And why was that? Because he was so difficult?
Yeah, well, that plus the fact he was cold. He hadn't had a hit for years, you know.
Well, you know what? You kind of like jumped ahead again when I said let's start at the beginning. Before you produced him, you went to England several times.
Oh, yeah. We'd go
And
to
Australia.
Australia.
What were you doing?
Just going to Australia and Europe. No, I'm watching Jerry carry on over there. No, we went over there one time.
What was your job, your title?
Well, at that particular time, I was producing his shows, and
Okay.
that was an impossible feat. But we were over there, and one thing in Australia I thought was very funny. He was really heavy in rock and roll and a superstar. I mean, he was big then, and the kids were going just crazy over him. And after the show, they found out where we were staying, And this particular hotel, it was in Sydney, Australia, they had towels. Liz, they were this thick. I mean, they were thick towels. I couldn't tear them for anything in the world. And there were just tons of teenage girls down there screaming and hollering. We were on maybe the 4th, 5th, 6th floor, I don't recall. And Jerry said, I'm going to throw towels at them. And he would throw a towel, and he said, come here and watch this. And I went and I'm looking, and these kids were shredding these heavy towels. And they had pieces like 6 or 8 inches tall, and I swear I was pretty stout then. I could not have torn one of those towels. I don't know how the kids did it, but he got the biggest kick out of that. And, oh gosh, we had so many good things happen overseas.
I want you to tell them this story. There's a couple of stories that I find very interesting with him. You were over there recording. Now, this is when you started recording him.
Yeah.
Okay?
We're in England.
Now we're going to jump forward a little bit.
Right.
You have passed the promotion of him, and now you're recording him.
Records.
And you're in England, and you're recording. And you know where I'm going with this story.
I think I do.
So finish that story.
I can't recall the studio. It doesn't matter. It was in London. And it was a deal where we had set it up with Mercury Records. It had been actually responsible for setting all of that, the logistics of it. All the rock and roll players that were influenced by Jerry Lee Lewis and Chuck Berry and Little Richard and all of them, these people wanted to come in and play on a record with Jerry Lee Lewis. Mm-hmm. And every one of them, the big stars, were coming to play on one particular song. You know, it was called The Sessions. And Ringo Starr was going to play drums on one. He was with the Beatles. And, well, he was part of the Beatles.
Well, I think we know who Ringo Starr is.
Well, Jerry didn't. So Jerry was in the studio, and he's out there clowning around, you know. He'd had some drinks, and he's got an audience, and he's carrying on. And Ringo Starr, bless his heart, he was in the lounge there at the studio. And I'd go to him and I'd say, hey, Ringo, thanks for waiting. We'll be ready to record the next song just a little bit. I'd go back in there and say, Jerry, we need to be cutting. Well, we'll get to it in a minute. You know, he was being his obstinate self. And finally, I just got tired of apologizing to Ringo Starr. So I said, Jerry, we're going to the next cut. I said, Ringo Starr has been out there in that lounge for 1 hour waiting to play on this cut with you. And he said, who in the hell is Ringo Starr? You know how he talks. And I said, he's one of the Beatles, Jerry. And he said, well, I don't care if he's a Louisiana cockroach. You just tell him to wait. Well, that was just him talking. We went ahead and got Ringo in, and we played on the cut, and everything was good. But it was just the way he looked at me and said, I don't care if he's a Louisiana cockroach. You know?
He had quite the attitude, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Like, maybe I'll let the Beatles touch me or come in the same room with me.
That's the attitude he had. Now let's back up because I got ahead of us. Okay, that's my fault. There's another story that I find very interesting, being who he was and how much money he made. And this was before you were producing his records.
Right.
You were flying around with him.
Yep.
And he went to get fuel in his airplane.
Oh, yeah. I was the bag man. I had to carry the money. The bag man? Yeah, I carried the money from the shows.
All the shows were cash?
Jerry would not work except for cash.
He only worked for cash?
And he was working then for maybe $25,000 a night or so. And it would take cash, and the promoter was paying him off the money that came in through the door, ticket sales and what have you. Mm-hmm. So there was 1s, 5s, 10s, 20s, 50s, all kind of denominations in a suitcase. And sometimes there'd be $300,000 in there. And we planned the DC-3 then, Jerry's DC-3, which is the same plane that years later went down with Ricky Nelson and killed him.
Same plane?
Same plane.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I had begged Jerry to get rid of that plane for 2 or 3 years because every time it would go in for inspections, we'd be without a plane for maybe a month because the plane was from the World War II.
Wow.
And the great old airplane, they still fly it to this very day. The DC-3s or some charter companies are flying them. But it was, it'd be hung up waiting on parts and everything. He finally did what Ricky Nelson had chartered it from a charter company in L.A., and Jerry hadn't owned the plane in 10 years. So it was 10 years older than when we were having trouble with it. And when I heard it went down and found out it was Jerry's plane that Ricky Nelson was on, it was kind of like, I'm sure the interior was changed, or maybe it wasn't. But I could see the interior of the plane. I had my desk in there in a desk chair. And if you're looking at the pilots, it would have been on the left side of the plane. and I saw the configuration of how it was when it was Jerry's plane and we were flying it, and I thought, wow, and Ricky Nelson died on that airplane.
Wow. Could have been you.
They claim it was that he was doing something he shouldn't have been doing, and that required fire, and it caught the plane on fire, but that's not it. I don't know, but I think the plane was just old, and he shouldn't have been flying, and the plane should not have been in the air.
Okay. So let's back up again.
Backing up again.
You've been backing up again. You've got this bag with all this money, and you need fuel.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we stopped at the ground base station to fuel the plane, and I think it was about $3,000 to fill it up, and we had a Gulf.
Way back then?
Yeah.
Wow.
We carried a lot of fuel.
When was that, like the 60s?
Yeah, that was in the 60s. So
that's a lot of money then.
We had a Gulf credit card, and I gave it to the guy, and it didn't accept the card. And Jerry hadn't paid the card. So we were not taking off until the man's paid. So I go get the suitcase, and I'm in there, and I'm counting out $3,000 in $1 bills, $5 bills, $20 bills. And I said, Jerry, don't ever do that again. He said, son, I just didn't know I had to pay it. I said, you had a lot of money on that. So anyway, he got it paid, but that was quite an experience counting out $3,000 in ones and fives and tens, or whatever the guy had in the gates. But Jerry was that way. Jerry was different. He was all about, he lived in his own world.
Wild child.
Yeah, I needed a driver's license, but he didn't, because his name was Jerry Lee Lewis.
In his mind.
In his mind.
Let's clarify that. He did need one. He didn't think he needed one.
He
thought he was above the law with the IRS, which they showed him a trick.
Yep, they took everything he had. Boy, that was sad to see that stuff go.
Yeah.
I mean, a 1953 Corvette with 200 miles on it.
What about that nice motorcycle that was given to him?
Steve Allen, who had that TV show, Steve Allen Show, gave Jerry his first break on TV, and gave Jerry a white Harley Davidson. I remember it being just white on white. The saddlebags were white, everything was white, and maybe it had 100 miles on it. The IRS took that too, and some other older antique cars. But he just told them as they were taking them off, he said, take them. He said, I'll have more there tomorrow.
And he did.
And he did.
He did.
They did take some cash, though. They found $15,000 or $20,000 in a shoebox in the attic. Boy, they went through everything.
Well, see, he should bury it, not put it in the attic. I mean, he didn't believe in banks, evidently, so put it in a jar and put it in the ground.
He finally kind of got back into the groove when he started getting country hits, and I cut the first country hit another place, another time. And I was telling you, there were not songs when we got back to record Jerry. No one had brought songs. But I had heard a song that Del Reeves had recorded. And Del could do the up-tempo songs, but not ballads. Didn't do well with those. And I said, that'll be a hit for Jerry Lee Lewis. So I called Jerry Chestnut, who I knew and we'd become friends, who wrote that song. And it was 10 o'clock at night, maybe 10:30. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I got my pajamas on, getting ready to go to bed. I said, if you'll bring me a copy of Another Place, Another Time, I'll cut it at 10 o'clock in the morning on Jerry Lee Lewis. And he said, well, all right. And he drove up in his pajamas, blew the horn. Then I went out and got a demo from him, played it for Jerry Lee Lewis. I said, it's the #1 record. We cut it the next morning at 10, and it was a hit. It opened up a whole new field, and all the country records started. And then years later, we had, it's different with record labels. You change labels, you change producers a lot of times. And Jerry changed labels, and I didn't produce Jerry again until 1979. And we did 39 and Holding.
On the Killer album.
On the Killer album, and we did a lot of stuff. Went to Caribou Ranch in Colorado, which was the most famous recording center. Or facility, I should say.
No, we talked about that a couple of times.
We did it there. Jim Isbell, we talked about, Jimmy was up there playing drums, and we had a good time, made a lot of records. We cut 33 sides in about a week. I had to finish in about a week because I was bringing Billy Joe Shaver in to do his album for Columbia Records the following week. So Jerry
some of those were never put out, were they?
No, some weren't. They got tangled up in legalities when Jerry left Warner Brothers. Jerry had a thing where he didn't mean it. He never did. He would tell somebody, I think I just ought to kill you. I wasn't going to kill anybody, but that was the thing he would say. Well, he told that to somebody that worked at Warner Brothers about a guy by the name of Jimmy Bowen, who also at one time was a close friend of mine, and we did a lot of work together. And that guy went and told Jimmy Bowen, Jerry Lee Lewis said he's going to kill you. What a foolish thing to do. Jerry Lee Lewis wasn't going to kill Jimmy Bowen. And, well, Jimmy Bowen hired somebody to start his cars. That is true. No, I'm telling you, but he was doing a lot of work at a studio called the Sound Shop. The Sound Stage. And he parked his cars behind it, of course, with everybody else's. And he didn't hire somebody specifically for that, but he had kind of a guy, a gopher guy, I don't know what you call him, run errands. He'd have him go out. A gopher? Yeah, and he'd have him go out and start the car, make sure it wasn't, because he believed Jerry Lee Lewis was going to kill him.
So if the car blew up, then it blew him up?
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt him.
Nice guy.
Yeah. We had some times together, Jerry and I, and years went by, and we just kind of lost touch, and then, of course, he died and what have you, but the memories of the miles we went together, that DC-3, getting back to that DC-3, I was begging him to get rid of it every day, and he finally did, and he got a bigger plane. But when we would go to California, we were going into the wind. I'm telling you the truth. In good weather, that plane would cruise at about 135 miles an hour. When we get into a headwind of about 60.
You could drive a car faster than that.
I'm looking out the window, and I'm watching the same farm. You could tell it was a farm because, the fences and all. I'd watch that farm for 30 minutes. I said, Jerry, we've got to get a bigger, better plane,
Let's, before you were producing him with Mercury and whatever label you produced him on, you guys had a falling out prior to that.
We had a bunch of fallings out.
Well, I meant your last falling out before you became producing him.
It was a strange thing. I was looking for something different to do, and I was talking to Loretta Lynn, and she had offered me a deal to come run her publishing companies. And I pretty much agreed to it. And I was in a hotel in Nashville. The phone rang, and it was Cecil Harrison's, Jerry's friend. He said, Jerry's been looking for you. He wants to start all his companies, and he wants you to run them all. And if you apply out here to Seattle, there'll be a plane ticket at the counter for you in the morning. I thought, well, Jerry and I are friends. Maybe that'd be better. So anyway, we went and met in Seattle and came back to Memphis to start Jerry Lee Lewis Enterprises, which encompassed a publishing company, management, which I was doing that, and booking. I had a booking agent. And I rented these really, really beautiful offices near the airport in Memphis. And I thought, I got to keep Jerry out of those beer joints. I'm going to set up an office for him and make him feel like he's like doing some business. And I brought this beautiful, beautiful desk with his money. Gosh, I can't recall, but it was a high dollar desk, like maybe $3,000 or $4,000. And
which would equate to what, 10,000
at least,
today?
Yeah.
15 for a desk?
Yeah, and so it backfired on me because when the joints closed in Memphis, he just brought all the party to the office. And I would come in the morning, and they would be like a drunk laying on the couch, passed out, and this and that. And the saddest thing, a fan had made him a Bowie knife that looked more like a machete or something. It probably was 18, 20 inches long. And I came in, and the desk was like this. It was like a beef chip. He had stayed up all night listening to Hank Williams and Al Jolson chopping on that desk. And he chopped all the way through that desk.
That's a lot of chopping.
Had a lot of chopping, yes. But he was taking a lot of help doing it. So
yes.
Anyway, he was wanting me
Was it his buttons?
He was wanting, his buttons. He had to wear zippers. Like Roger Miller told me one time, I have to wear zippers because I keep taking my buttons. But Jerry was a different cat. But he wanted to party all night and, like maybe 3 days in a row and then go to bed for a couple of days. And one day he said, son, you're not partying with me. And I said, Jerry, this was in 19 gosh, I can't remember the year now, maybe 72, 3. I can't party with you and run your business in the daytime. And he said, well, son, I'll tell you what, you're going to have to fall in or fall out. And I said, well, son, let me tell you something. I think I'm just going to fall out. Mm-hmm. And I hightailed it back to Nashville.
And you gave up your job with Loretta Lynn, with her.
Yeah, passed on that, and shouldn't have, because I love Loretta.
No, you shouldn't have, because Loretta would have been steadfast.
What a doll Loretta Lynn was.
I didn't get to meet her.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't, because she was a sweetheart. She really was. Mm-hmm. I told her one time we were talking, because Loretta and I spent a lot of time visiting, and I didn't like to fly. And I finally got where I could do it without getting totally inebriated. But I was telling Loretta, I said, I don't like to fly, Loretta. I've got to drink about 6 beers. They didn't sell mixed drinks in Nashville then, as fast as I can, and get about half drunk to get on a plane. She said, oh, not me, Kilroy. She said, I don't want to die and meet Jesus drunk.
That sounds like something she would say.
Yeah, she was a doll.
Well, I think...
The world misses her. Jerry Lee Lewis is a legend, and Jerry Lee pretty much outlived his legend.
He did.
But he left a lot of great music out there and a lot of great memories for a lot of people. And anything I've said about Jerry, I didn't mean to say anything derogatory necessarily about him or to hurt Jerry Lee Lewis, because Jerry and I were still friends, and I made quite a bit of money with Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yes, you've been approached in the past to write a tell-all book on him, and you refused to do it.
Many times, yeah.
Because of... You just won't do it. And then during this session right here, there's many things you didn't say that I know. Yeah. And you refuse to degrade him. You don't betray a friend, and you don't betray someone that paid you honestly good money for work. Mm-hmm. And you just don't expose them. So the people that have approached me to do a tell-all book on Jerry Lee Lewis, I politely told them no. I'll tell you, I'll talk about his music, but I'm not going to talk about much else. Because, I don't know about the polite part. Oh, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe not. No, maybe not. Boy, it's been a wonderful time. I've been thinking about things with Jerry that we did, and he was the stories you've told me over the years, that he was. You had to get him straight in order to record him, and that was a chore. Oh yeah, and I've got a story that's wild. It took me 2 weeks to get Jerry straight, because everybody knows Jerry did drugs, okay? And I would work very, very hard to get him isolated and prepared to go to the studio. And he was right, and we were recording. And who comes by but my friend George Jones? And all of a sudden, Jerry's gone. And George was going through that bad spell of cocaine and drinking, you know, but that's before he married Miss Nancy, and she got him straightened up. But I missed Jerry. Jerry wasn't in the studio, and I asked the guys, I said, where's Jerry? And they said, he and George are in the restroom. Well, there's only one bathroom in the studio. And so I knocked on the door, and I said, hey, Jerry, come on out. What are you doing? Oh, George is telling me a joke. Well, I knew what they were doing, so I just backed off and kicked the door down. Now, let's remember you were 6'4" and stout, so that was no problem. Those were early days. And I kicked the door in, and they came out, and I told George, I said, George, I've got this guy straight, and you came by, and you got him messed up, and we talked a little bit, not bad. And George left at my request. And you know, the next day, George Jones called me and apologized. Well, that's nice of him. He said, Kilroy, I was wrong to do that, and I understand why you kicked the door down. I don't imagine you were real nice to them when you kicked the door down. You know that we were friends. We stopped and sure, I know that, but he was messing with your session, and I can just imagine, like I know you, that you were not real nice about it. Those were early days. You didn't say pretty please. And through the years, you mellow. Well, I've enjoyed visiting about Jerry Lee Lewis, George Jones. Gosh, we could go on forever. After 4 decades in the music industry and living in Nashville, the stories are endless. Yes, they are. And so many are good. I was talking about doing Another Place, Another Time, and Jerry Chestnut bringing that song to me in almost the middle of the night. A great writer and a great friend. I look back on friendships like that, and a lot of those people you've met and become friends with, you know, like
Ray Price and I were very close, and you became very close to Ray Price. He loved you, gave you a horse, which is another story for another episode. But hey, don't forget our sponsor, Total Feeds. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. It really is. We were introduced to that at our ranch in Texas
about 15, 16 years ago.
About 15, yeah. And our horses have been on
it ever
Feeds
since.
Ever since, and they are just absolutely wonderful. Dr. Harry Anderson, I don't know whether I should say this or not, because I'm really, whether someone told me or Dr. Anderson told me, but I think at one time Dr. Anderson was working for a well-known major feed company.
I think so. Yeah, I believe I remember that.
And he was not totally satisfied and thought he could build and make a better feed. And that's what he did.
That's what he did.
He went out and made Total Equine. And it was extruded, which meant baked, which it dissolves in the horse's stomach, and they absorb all the nutrients. Then that became so big and so successful, he went into total everything, like Total Bovine, and also Total Bull. And I've said this before on our podcast. As I watched the bucking bulls on the PBR, at the NFR and all that, many of them are on Total Bull.
A lot of them are.
Yeah, because it enhances rather the muscle, and the fat drops off, and then all of a sudden you've got 1,800, 2,000 pounds of muscle bull. So they're going for that. And then the Total People, it makes people feel better.
Yeah, I put 4 of them in your coffee this morning.
Oh, I'm feeling pretty good. You'll have to talk.
Well, we need to wrap this up today, and we would certainly like for everybody to, go on Instagram, TikTok, email.
I have to interrupt you.
No, don't interrupt me.
Total Canine. Are we going to raise the new babies on Total Canine?
Most likely.
Yeah, they're on baby food now, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're little mini Aussies.
Yes.
They've been on a podcast? I don't know.
Their pictures?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Those pictures of those mini Aussies are going to be on, Total Canine.
Well, anyway,
we're going to
don't forget to email us, Instagram us, whatever you want to do. You want to hear about something, let us know.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, and also subscribe.
And also subscribe.
And also remember our sponsor, Total Feeds. Hey, thanks for being with us for another episode of Kilroy's Outlaws, Legends, and Behind the Music. God bless each and every one of you.
Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music. If you have any thoughts or questions about the content, email them. Kilroy Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. That's Kilroy, no S, Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. And don't forget to subscribe. Third-party use of any part of this podcast without the expressed consent of Eddie Kilroy is prohibited. The Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music podcast is a production of Eddie Kilroy.